Hey everyone tuning in, welcome to our podcast. Stay tuned for deep dives. I'm one of your co-hosts, Carter, and I'm joined with my other lovely co-host, Tori. And you know what? Today we are all decked out, aren't we, Tori?
Absolutely.
I
And I'm
mean,
a little bit concerned. Um, I thought I was coming to talk about the personal era, but maybe you're about to shove some Sudoku at me. Like, what's going on?
I know I'm in my Rentaro
'Cause
shirt. Yeah, I love
you look
this.
suspiciously like Rentaro.
I feel like I should do my deer pose for everyone. That he does. But yeah, no, I love this shirt because it's literally an exact replica of what he wears. So you gotta show everyone what you're wearing.
Okay, yes, I do have to like move because my big old mic hides. So I'm in Sea of Darkness merch, courtesy of Ginger Honey Love Beat.
I love
Um,
that one.
and so, but it actually means we are the perfect bookends to the games we are discussing today
I know.
because you are the game we must start with, and Sea of Darkness is the game that we must finish with
It's a
for this
true
era.
perfect pairing for this episode today.
And we did not agree ahead of time that that's how we would do it.
That's
It's just the
because the
it's just the
wavelengths
clothes
are
we have
here
always.
always. Always. But as we've been discussing with our eras, we always kind of start off with the Outlier game. And so that is Shadow at Water's Edge. I always want to say, every time I say that game title, I always want to say Secret of the Shadow at the Waters of the Edge. Every time it always gets twisted.
Shadow, secret, who knows? Some
Yeah, it
word.
always gets
You
stuck
know,
in my
just spit
head.
it out. We always know what we're talking about.
Right.
And then,
Um,
well, my thing is, I always wanted to just walk around calling it SAW
oh,
because of
yeah,
the
that too.
acronym,
Yep. Yep, yep,
because
yep.
it can't be Shaw because Secret of Shadow Ranch took
Right.
the
And it
L,
can't be That's because that's Secret of Scarlet Hand.
and it can't be. I'm trying to think. Yeah. Oh my word. All the acronyms. Anyway, that would be
Studift.
okay. Yeah.
Stay
I
tuned
feel
for
I'm
danger.
holding back before we go on a tangent of why are some of the acronyms the way that they are.
Oh, I
Anyway,
know. Yes.
Shadow of the Water's Edge. What a
Yes.
game.
What a
I'm
game.
excited that we get to start with this one
I know. Yeah. And it's actually great
because it's
because
an interesting outlier.
it is an interesting outlier, and it really does have a blend, I feel like, of the previous era before it, experimental, and also the one that we're going to be talking about a pretty good bit today, the personal era. So I guess we should just kind of start off with talking about, well, what makes it so experimental? Where's the blend from its previous era, and how does it do that? Tori, do you want to like kick us off with that?
Yeah, so honestly, we don't really, I feel like, need to spend a whole lot of time on this part because I
Sure.
do think, as an outlier, Shout Out the Water's Edge's strength is more in it really does when we kind of step back and we talk
Hmm.
about some things. Like, it is a very interesting setup to where we're headed. But I mean, they are continuing just to mess around with little things. Like, they kept, we talked in the experimental era about, they're messing with gameplay, like things with the phone. So, the cell phone actually is quite interesting because it was again, the other thing I remember now, I'm thinking about last week. Remember we talked about these random like things they try once in the
Yes.
experimental era games and they never do it again? Would you like avatars to come back? Like, what a fascinating little thing to be able to do is to have avatars on
And to
your
send them to
phone.
other people.
And yes, and having someone text you pictures, you
Yes.
can text them back and actually get responses to your message. Like, oh, that's
Yes.
so great.
It was so
Yeah.
fun. It felt very real.
So yes, so they kept messing around with that, and I had remembered like phone charms. Phone charms showed up in this era, just that fun little extra thing to go hunting for. Again,
Yes.
talking about like encouraging replayability because get all your phone charms and globetrotting. She's still headed all over the world. Now she's found her way all the way over to Japan. So
Hmm.
Nancy's just racking up those miles. And I actually think here, this is where I feel like, really see it, and this is actually going to be like the perfect transition into, experimental era into what the personal era is headed toward.
Sure.
And also this is a good setup for another episode that's coming later this season. Is again, they're messing around, I feel like, with the story. Shadow at the Water's Edge has always stood out to me, as I feel like story-wise, there is no game that feels like Shadow at the Water's Edge. Like, in terms of that, like the kind of like the darkness and the sadness, and now we're dealing with like some very real, very like human and, shall I say, personal issues in this game.
But I'm.
Um, Not just like, obviously, with the Shimizu family
Sure.
and their like personal trauma over what has happened to Kasumi, but then also, and I think now, Carter, you can kind of start setting us up for what era we're talking about today, is that this game, not so much when you play it the first time, but when you kind of step back and you put it like in the context of things that unfold later in the series, it's actually, I believe, and I think you agree with me, it's a surprisingly personal game for Nancy herself.
Yes.
So I think you should tell us more about that, because this is actually, I feel like, been one of my biggest kind of like things that I really like to chew on and think about with Shadow at the Water's Edge,
Oh,
like
yes.
lately,
I
because it's, I don't know,
Oh, I no,
it's
I
just
couldn't agree
so
with you
important.
more. I see I see, kind of like what you're looking at, and a lot of what the personal era is rooted in is Nancy. It's a lot about Nancy. Every single game has a lot to do with her, her personality, her internal conflict and struggles. And when we're looking at Shadow at Water's Edge, where we start to see this little bit of what we're about to enter into is how Nancy reacts to this family and their trauma with dealing with their mother's death. And this will become very pivotal to Nancy's story that we'll learn about later in the personal era when we get to the
Yes.
Silent Spy. So
Yeah. Well, and can we just pause for a second and really address kind of like, do you agree with me? I feel like kind of one of the biggest inside jokes in the fandom is that we all really love to give Nancy a hard time.
yes.
Fairly so for how she behaves in this game.
Yes.
Haven't
It's
we all either like thought in our head or like said aloud to our computer,
oh
like,
yeah.
Nancy, get a grip, girl. Like, stop
Yes.
asking this poor family what happened to their dead mother. Like, do you not see? Like, they don't want to talk about it. It was very
Yes.
sad and painful. And I remember, like, for the longest time, that was where I landed. Like, man, Nancy's just social tact. She's got a lot of skills. That's not one of them. And that is true. But then once you know what's coming, and I have no idea. We had talked about like Kathy Reuter and Nick Blahunka. We had mentioned that are going to become important figures in this era, overseeing like the stories and stuff. We kind of touched on that, and I don't know if they had conversations while making this game about building towards, the things with Nancy working through her own grief with her mom. But even if they didn't, like, it's kind of crazy coincidence, and I feel like still just says a lot about Nancy. Like, I feel like when I play this game now, it feels like Nancy's heart is just getting put out on display, and like Nancy doesn't even realize. I'm like, Nancy, you're telling me so much about you right now, and you don't even realize it. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And and I feel like we get to see a lot of how Nancy deals with her emotions in the personal
yeah,
era. And so this is, I feel like, one of the just the earliest moments where we're really getting to see it in a very visceral sense. Like this is a very very deep, like so it actually kind of reminds me. It's funny you were talking about this, and then it reminded me of how we respond to how Nancy talks about it with the family. And I distinctly remember feeling that kind of same emotion when uh like the earliest I can think about is Curse of Blackmore Manor, when she's talking with Jane about her dead hamster,
Oh,
and how she's just like, when did it die? And Jane's like, I don't really want to talk about this, you know. And that was like, I feel like the earliest memory right now in this moment that I can think of. But now what we're entering, what we're talking about with Shadow at Water's Edge, it's a very like personal, we're going to use that word a lot, deep wound that this family has that Nancy's asking about. And that's kind of those darker themes that we're about to talk about with the personal era. Like a lot of the thematics of this specific next few games are much more mature than we've ever seen before in a Nancy Drew game. I think that it's, like you said, very telling of how Nancy deals with how she feels about certain things. Like it's very telling.
yeah.
And it we just learned so much about Nancy from game to game to
Yeah.
game. So
And even what you said about Curse of Blackmore Manor made me think of how, like, Jane says, I don't want to talk about this. And Nancy, to her credit, like, she lets it go. She doesn't
exactly
ever
right.
ask Jane about it. She does not let this go. And I realized, because, well, she's got to solve the mystery. That's the whole point. She kind of has to keep asking and pursuing. But at the
Sure.
same time, I just really think it's actually saying something about, like, why does Nancy care so much about getting an answer to this question of how
Yeah.
this mom died. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's because she, even if she doesn't realize it, she is processing her own, beginning to process her own thoughts about, like, my mom died and
Mm-hmm.
we fight, like, turned out not to be the way Nancy thought, like, and that becomes a whole thing. So
Oh
I just,
yeah.
it really is. I think both of us really just think with this Outlier that, although it doesn't seem like a game about Nancy, kind of in hindsight is 2020. It's quite a bit about Nancy.
Sure.
And then also, I think, can we also mention, just because um we have a secondary name for this era,
Ah,
not
yes.
just as the personal era, but we also, and this came up in your previous content on the eras, that another way you could describe this era is you can call it the social era. And that is because this is really when her interactive social media presence just skyrocketed, and they were, even to fit it in, like, they were having more personal engagement, I feel like, with the
Yes.
fans
Yes.
because of Facebook and Twitter, and then Instagram kind of slowly coming onto the scene later. And it was actually during Shadow at the Water's Edge that Kalina Herman, who we all knew back then as Little Jackalope, she joins the team, like, officially during this time, and gets start taking over the amateur sleuth blog posts. And I actually tried to track down, like, her very first post to see what it was. And if I found the right one, she wrote her first amateur sleuth blog post in November 2010, and Shadow at the Water's Edge had released in October, just the month before.
Yes.
So
Yes.
these things also go together at that. And again, she kept that blog so active
Yes, she did.
and was the face of the company, like, to all of us. Like, a lot of us kind of feel like we grew up with Kalina. I think. And Kalina, if you're listening, of course, we all love you, and we
Yes.
love all the work that you put into that and all the other marketing things you've done over the years. But I just want to mention that because we are going to touch on a little bit, not from the her interactive side of things, like
How
social
much they
media,
were
and
engaging with.
and even how it shapes. I know you also have pointed out, like, them getting more involved on social media actually started to also influence the way they, to a degree, the way they made the games in this era, because they
Oh
were
yeah.
getting more fan involvement.
Yes. And
We
I
just want to note that in our Outlier conversation. So more
absolutely.
to come.
Absolutely. And I think those are the exact things that we're seeing in Shadow at Water's Edge that make it experimental, but also make it personal. But let's dive more deeply into personal. Let's kind of assess this era and see what makes it so personal to Nancy and her life. So, as far as our key characteristics, because we've been going through that for each era, when we start with the personal era, which we're discussing games, really almost the rest of the games here, we're talking about Captive Curse all the way until Sea of Darkness. Um, One of the biggest key characteristics of the personal era is that the games are now taking fans through Nancy's personal life, this journey through her personal life. It shifts primarily from being a more mystery based game. When you think about the past games that came before it, like if we want to talk about, Danger on Deception Island, like she's just trying to go on vacation and she stumbles into another mystery. And it's really not learning much more about Nancy as it is all the suspects and
Yeah.
culprits and the things that she comes into play with. Now, in this era, we're having to have a lot more backstory and side stories that accompany the main story, but are giving us more details about who Nancy is and her life. So, the things that kind of stand out actually start in the very first game, Captive Curse, is we
Oh
start
yes.
having
Oh
a
my word.
lot
They
of
just went for it.
relationship drama.
Yes. Yes, we'll get very into Nancy's love life more than ever before in this era.
Oh yeah. And do you remember
They
do you
they
remember
love the
playing
conflict.
Captive Curse? And were you just like, "Oh, when I mean in the first 10 minutes of the game, you get that phone call as soon as you like are going up the stairs on Castle Finster and there's a phone call and it does not go great. There's actually some static on the phone call
Yeah.
because they have a bad connection. And
Mhm. Mhm.
do you see what I'm seeing?
I see it.
I see what you're doing, her interactive. But yeah, no, it starts in this era, and funnily enough, the conflict with Ned, although it goes throughout the era, it actually ends in this era in Sea of Darkness, which we'll get to, later when we kind of flesh that out. But yeah, no, like there's a lot of like teasing going back and forth. How do you feel about all this relationship drama, Tori?
Oh, well, I don't dare say everything that I that I think, or
Why?
I'm gonna steal notes for a future episode, and also you're gonna get me onto a soapbox that you're probably not gonna be able to yank me off of. So just keep listening. We have many deep dives planned.
Sure.
Um, but I do remember it was. I do remember technically they in a small way started kind of poking at Ned and Nancy issues in earlier games, not so much in terms of those two being at odds with each other. Like I do remember this Captive Curse was shocking because they had a flat out like they had a fight.
A whole
Like
fight.
they ended that conversation in an argument. Nancy then, she had to get boyfriend advice from
Oh
Anya,
yeah, I forgot about
and
that.
Frank had to call her and say, "I don't know what you've done, Nancy, but you have broken Ned." And like Joe's having to console, like it was a whole thing. And Joe writes that crazy letter about a world without Ned and Nancy is like peanut butter
Butter
and
with yeah, yeah.
sadness, jelly, and uncomfortable. Like and I always remember, like we're talking, and fabric of the universe. Oh my word, these two are fighting. Like what's going on? This really went hard in a way earlier games had not. Like they started to poke a little bit about like, ooh, the Hardy Boys are here. Ooh, Frank's cute, and but that was all. I feel like it, and Ned also he might be a little bit jealous of that, but I just feel like the earlier games that touched on that in any kind of way, like they just kind of they'll poke at it a little bit and then leave it alone. But then this era just keeps
Fully
like it
welcomes it.
starts with this game, and then little things keep coming up in pretty much every game because
Every
obviously
game.
Captain Curse has hits its thing, And then there was Alibi and Ashes, where they actually brought Ned in. Ned needs to help solve a mystery. Like, Ned needs to go on a date with another girl
Hmm.
by Nancy's request to like help get her out of jail. And um there's more. They really go for the love triangle. Like Captive Curse goes like Frank's feelings, and then people who have seen, there's a very iconic like ending credits part of Deadly Device. Hopefully everyone listening knows about this. Like I know all the Frank and Nancy shippers do. Like the infamous, he tries to leave a voicemail and he was totally going to confess some feelings, and then the voicemail cut him off. And but then they keep swinging back like Silent Spy. There's more like Ned and Nancy stuff in there because he's helping her work through this case with her mom. And then of course, yes, then it builds. I feel like the climax, at least for this her interactive team, Sea of Darkness was huge because then they laid it out past the whole like Nancy forgot their anniversary. Like, oh my word, what a horrid girlfriend. But they built the whole moment up to this key like he loves her. Does she love him back? And they like put a choice in the player's hands. Like, do you love Ned back or no? And it was such a big moment. And yeah, is the drama done? Who knows? I would like for it to be, but yeah, it was quite a I feel like overarching
Yeah, because
thing
if you think about
in
it, the
this
drama's been
era.
going on since 2011. So it's probably time to settle this drama and move on to something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, we definitely, this is a topic that we both have a lot of thoughts about. We need to come back to,
For
yes,
sure. For sure.
the Ned and Nancy relationship and how that has evolved. But then also, like what you were saying, like we're just diving into so much more of Nancy's personal life. And it's interesting to me, yeah, this whole like this tension between like each game needs to be standalone. It has to have a
Hmm.
mystery of some sort that's like self-contained. So you can just play that game and enjoy it. But then yes, like this era, so much backstory and revolving around Nancy. And you really almost in a way to appreciate it, like it's almost like they're forcing you. Forcing is the wrong word, but it's like definitely encouraging, like keep coming back. There's more to this story.
Yes.
We have more to tell you. There's more to learn about Nancy. Like this, I would be very hesitant to kind of tell someone to just jump into some of the games in this era because I would feel
Agreed.
like no, like you're there's so much backstory that you just missed out on
Agreed.
because they were like I can't imagine like if someone starts with the Silent Spy. That's I mean like that's fine. Hopefully they enjoy it and want to keep playing the other games, but I cannot imagine like personally telling someone, yeah, you should start with the Silent Spy. Like
Sure.
no, you gotta build up to that game, or like starting with Sea of Darkness and the whole Ned and Nancy thing. Like all the gravity of that situation is lost unless you have played the games
Or
leading up to it.
or even starting with
Or even seeing
Alibi and
River Heights because
Ashes.
that's another. Yes,
Yes, because
that's where I was
Alibi and
going.
yes, absolutely, because Alibi and Ashes is like the epitome of everything about Nancy. We're getting to, for the first time ever in a Nancy Drew game, going to explore not just her whole room, not just her whole house, but her entire whole hometown.
Yes,
All of
and
it.
also the people like enemies and friends who know her the
Yes.
best.
Yes.
So this is yeah, those are very intensely personal details. And yes, I again, if someone starts with Alibi and Ashes, I absolutely think they could enjoy it. But
Oh yeah.
certainly I remember for me, the excitement of that game comes in. We've played 24 Nancy Drew games and we still haven't been to River Heights.
Yes.
And now finally we get to do it. Like, yeah, we get to, like within that
But
bigger picture
also there's a lot of
context. Yes.
personalities that I think make more
Yes.
sense if you have some backstory when you're playing any of
Yes.
these personal era games,
Absolutely.
really. Like Bess, George, Nancy, Ned, all of those personalities just really come together in this game.
Yes, well, and even like Alibi and Ashes, of course, is the one that did the whole like you get to actually choose who you're going to play as throughout the
Mm-hmm.
game. And I think having that background knowledge of what Ned, George, and Bess are like as people,
Absolutely.
that influences like who you want to pick to go,
Interrogate which
do this
suspect.
thing
Yeah.
or talk to this person.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels a lot more natural, yes, if you're already familiar with them.
Plus, not only
Because
that, but I
that,
think
yeah.
there also was some mention, trying not to spoil anything for the game, but I there was also some mention, I believe, from a culprit or suspect in this game where they talked about Nancy's past cases that she had solved. And even in the ending makes more sense because I think Nancy finds things like, oh, these are times I've solved past cases. Like all of those things are just more heightened if you know some of Nancy's past, which is why the personal era, these games, like you said, are hard to be standalone games. You have to have that prior knowledge because they are starting to unveil more about Nancy than ever before.
Yes. Yeah, and we've already we it came up already with Shadow at the Water's Edge, but of course they really made quite a whole backstory and to do about Nancy's relationship with her mom, and Silent Spy was kind of the climax of that. And in dealing with that, they then also for the first time I feel like really got to dive into some things about like Nancy and her relationship with her dad, because
Mm-hmm.
Carson had been a phone contact in other games. So I think it's. I mean, well, there's the Danger on Deception Island emails that Hannah
I
writes
love
about him, but
those.
that's fun little world building. But then and he's a phone contact in Secret of the Old Clock, and then obviously he helps from afar getting his daughter out of jail and Alibi and Ashes, but they interact with each other in Silent Spy, and they have very,
Very
very
real
intense, very
conversations.
real, intensely personal conversations with each other. Yes, that feel very true to life of the kind of things that a father and daughter who have been through a tragic situation like that might have to work through. And so you learn a lot about the two of them through that. And then I even think Sunny June getting his own game, like it's important not just for Sunny June
Huge.
himself, but I do
Yes.
think Sunny June getting his own game was an important moment for Nancy, because Sunny June was that iconic, mysterious guy who always seemed to be like one step ahead of her
Oh yeah.
in different locations. And so then finally this stranger who's has a very significant role in her life and helping her solve mysteries, we finally get to meet him. And then I'm excited to talk about this because this was really fun to think through. We got to talk, Carter, about how often and how close the personal era gets to letting us like actually see what Nancy looks like.
Oh, they tease it so much.
So much.
They
They're
tease it so
like,
much.
they go right up to the edge and they just dangle that carrot like again and again and again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because, like starting off, that was always a running joke in the games is that, oh, you never get to see Nancy because we, the player, are Nancy, right? So we
Mhm.
never really get to see her. I think the earliest time that they ever joke about it, I believe, is Secret of the Scarlet Hand, where we are like zoomed out and we kind
I
of get to,
think so.
and we get to see like Joanna with the jade carving, and you'd like see this shadow silhouette of Nancy. And it's
Yes.
it's actually funny because her interactive is doing that vault release right now currently on their Instagram stories, and they did do Secret of the Scarlet Hand and released what the shadow silhouette looked like.
Oh, I
And
had
so
such a moment over that.
I
Oh,
know, I did too. I was like,
I was like,
oh,
wow,
the
there
infamous
it is.
shadow. I'll have to try and see if we can put that up on the screen so you guys can see what we're talking about. Which, by the way, I have loved that Her Interactive series. So glad they did it. It's been very fun to see that every single day. But yeah, no, you got to see like the color of her dress and like what the color of her hair looked like.
Yeah.
It was
And
cool.
I was actually replaying Ghost Dogs earlier today before us
Oh,
recording this,
her hands
and
tied.
I was talking about, yes, the
I
shot of her
forgot.
hands and her
I forgot
feet.
about that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, so it comes up a little bit, but then this era, and again, this is
a lot.
also where Shadow at the Water's Edge proves to be the outlier.
Yes,
'Cause
absolutely.
was your mind not just blown
We
when
almost
that
saw her.
blurry photo pops out of the photo booth?
Yes, and we almost saw her.
Almost. Like,
Almost.
I don't know how you felt when you played that game for the first time, but
I was
to me,
shocked.
I don't care that that photo was blurry. Yes, I was shocked. I was like,
Yeah, was shocked
that's
because because you could still
that's
see like
Nancy.
her tightened
I can
hair and it was
yes,
long,
I can
had a
see her
headband.
hair and its
Yeah.
color, and I
Uh
can see
huh.
the clothes she's wearing,
Oh yeah.
and I can see, like, a face. There's eyes and ears and a nose and a mouth there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she's there, like, she's blurry, but I was like, "That's Nancy." Yeah,
Yep.
so
They went for
that
it.
was
They went
crazy.
for it. They went for it. They really did. But really, I think let's talk about just how much you can really see Nancy in this era because it truly is a
Yeah,
lot. And
we gotta go through all of them.
it starts with captive curse. I mean, I know it does we start to see it kind of blend from Shadow at Water's Edge, but it really starts with captive curse because I believe in the game it mentions how Nancy looks like um the girl that the monster would be after. So it does kind of allude to her appearance. It starts there and
A
then
little
it
bit. Yeah, they are
keeps
encouraging
going.
you to make that connection. Yes,
Yes. And so it keeps
I
going.
agree.
It keeps going. In Alibi and Ashes, we have
The
her
obscured
mugshot.
mugshot.
Yes, from the
You
cover.
don't see much, but still, like, she's there.
Yes. And
Mhm.
of course, then you have the biggest one, which is Silent Spy. That's huge. That's, you're basically seeing well, you basically get to see what she looks like as a baby, number one. We get to see
A little
bald
back,
headed baby
a little
Nancy.
downy hair. Yes.
Yes. But really, just getting to see her mom animated was huge because we know that she looks like her mom. So we're able to make that kind of connection of what she looks like. And that was a huge looks
Yeah.
aspect. And then,
That's another one I remember when I played Silent Spy for the first time. It was really kind of shocking
how
to
much
me,
that we were able to.
how much animating
Hmm.
they did for the mom, because I kept feeling like every time I saw her that I was, in a way, seeing Nancy. So it was this really weird kind of like discombobulating thing. I'm like,
Yes.
like, yeah, I know you're Kate Drew, but you're Nancy's mom,
Yeah.
and Nancy kind of looks like you. Like, so
Also helps, I feel that Lonnie got to
a
voice the
lot.
mom too,
That true. That Yeah,
to kind
that
of have that
choice.
like voice similarity. I love that.
Yeah, that makes it even stronger when you're hearing
Yes.
literally the same voice, just like an older version of
Yes.
it.
And then I
Yes.
feel like this is the most we've gotten to see Nancy pretty much because the Haunted Castle of Malloy, like you did get to see kind of like the top of her, but it was really dark in a lot of spots. But in this game, in Labyrinth of Lies, we see her whole backside in broad daylight.
Pops up out of that, yes, that onto that stage lift,
Ponytail,
and there she
jeans,
is.
horse shirt, and all.
And technically, Shatter Medallion had already been teasing that, because there's actually, at the beginning of that game, there's when they show all the
Oh
teams,
yeah, I
she's
forgot.
back to back with George, and you don't quite see, like, some of her is obscured by George,
Yes.
but her whole backside, like, she's standing right, you can very clearly see, like, the color of her hair and her, what her body looks like, the clothes she's wearing. And also, I think it's also worth pointing out, this is more like of a Kate Drew thing. So it's very interesting. They'll pull in, like, it's like they're trying to tell us what Nancy looks like by comparing her to someone else. If you remember when she goes and retrieves the personal items for Gunner in Sea of Darkness, and she finds the photo of his daughter, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
Nancy herself says something about, "Oh, she looks like me."
Yes.
and they actually did like they did a whole photo. So yes, they're very much
It's very
have
Nancy
in this
focused.
era, yes, doing everything to show us like what Nancy physically looks like without actually crossing that line. So, yes, just so personal, like views, Nancy's looks, yeah. We're just getting it's just everywhere.
Well,
Can't get
and
over it.
even beyond just us getting to see her and her looks, I feel like we're seeing a shift here in this era. It's shifting away, and we did talk about this briefly with Shout Out Water's Edge. Just how there are more mature themes coming, and it's very focused on how Nancy reacts to things, but it's almost shifting away from her just being a detective and just coming into the picture to solve mysteries. And now it's starting to shift into, well, Nancy is human and Nancy has internal conflict and struggles with emotions and how to deal with them and how to handle things like we all do. And we're starting to see that play out in a lot of these games. And I think you made a really great note about how, and I don't really feel like I've really quite thought about this with this era, but I feel like it makes perfect sense is that the player, like we playing these games, are having to make a lot of choices as to how Nancy, interacts with such things. And I'd love for you to like kind of talk about where your thoughts are with that.
Yeah, so I think you bring up a very important point that we're now moving past just, Nancy is a detective, but Nancy, she's human,
Yes.
just like the rest of us. And I really think that this era, with again, with all of this backstory, all of these interpersonal conflicts and um, tensions that Nancy has with people in her life, and learning more about the things that have shaped her, we really are being asked to consider like not just what is Nancy like as a detective. Well, you just play the games. Play all the games, you get a very clear sense of what Nancy is like as a detective, how she approaches things, how her mind works. And this era, more than any other, gives me the sense of what Nancy is like as a person. And sometimes that is her interactive's choice. They will make a story choice for Nancy, but I did, just as I was preparing for this episode, oh, it really was surprising to me. I just started thinking through like, whoa, I just feel like there are a lot of moments in the personal era where the player is repeatedly given choices and we're being given the power to kind of shape what we think Nancy is like. What we want her to be like, or I guess just for fun, like, oh, here's what here's on this replay, here's this version of Nancy, and then you can come back and you can make her a different kind of Nancy the second time around. So in the earlier eras, what stands out to me most is I always think of those moments maybe where someone will be like, sure, I can help you, but I need you to do something for me first. And they'll give her some kind of job to
To go
do.
pick
And
vegetables or something.
you remember, you always, I feel like you very often you get some sort of choice of like you can either be like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that
Right.
for you, or you get the kind of like, if I must, like some sort of like you can either be a very eager Nancy or a very like, really, I
Negative
have to
Nancy.
do this. Yeah, a negative Nancy. And it does come up. I'm not saying that it's not until the personal era that we're not
But it's
allowed to
very
kind of choose
mild.
choose how Nancy's going to react to things. But yes, I think it's only again just lightly touched on.
Sure.
Even just like the Ned and Nancy thing. I think the earlier eras only just lightly touch on these kind of things. And then this era repeatedly, I feel like just about every game you can find some really significant moments of like you have to make the choice. Like how's Nancy going to act? What's she going to say? What's she going to do in this situation? So, for example, Tomb of the Lost Queen, when I replayed it most recently, there was this very kind of wild conversation where they're talking about the whole like, did aliens build the pyramids? And Lily has this kind of like, she stops in her tracks and she's like, wait, do you believe that? And we're straight up given a choice to either say, yeah, maybe sounds as reasonable as the next thing, or like, no, of course not. And I think, that's kind of a big deal in terms of being open to whether aliens built the pyramids, which is more of a Sunny June way of approaching life, or like, no, being strictly like rational. Like, that's just silly. Aliens did not build the pyramids. Like, that's a very, I feel like, personality shaping kind of option, even though it's a little thing. And then I'll just go ahead and jump straight to what I think. This is such a big one. Okay,
It's
so we are
huge.
going to have to give kind of a little bit of like spoilers for Ghost of Thornton Hall. So beware. Maybe step away if you don't want to know how that game ends. But the mansion sets on fire at the end of the game, and Nancy, that game has 3 endings, and you have to decide who are you going to save. Is Nancy going to be the hero who repeatedly puts her life on the line and tries to save everybody, like will save Harper, but then also go save Clara, who is the culprit in that game? Like, so you have the like most heroic choice, or there's like the middle ground option where you can choose to save Harper, but say like, nope, too dangerous, can't go save Clara, she's on her own. Or there is the third option where Nancy chooses only to save herself. She said, like, it's too dangerous, I'm not going to save anyone else. Now, again, they had to be careful because, the rating and the target audience, there's not really what I would consider serious implications to choosing one of the, less heroic options. Like, no one in the game actually dies if you choose not to save them, but still, it makes you come away with a certain kind of perspective of Nancy,
Sure.
like being willing to risk her life to save other people, including saving someone who, like, is guilty of something, or only focusing like on herself. And it is interesting, those endings do play out very differently. Like, I have played all 3 of the Ghost of Thornton Hall endings, and the family, like how they behave toward Nancy based on what choice she made, like it creates a totally different like feel to the game. And I always like, I don't like choosing the less pleasant options because they always leave me with bad taste in my mouth, because
Yes.
I always walk away feeling like I am the most horrible person. Like, by extension,
Yes.
Nancy is the most horrible person ever. And now this family hates us. And
Yes.
we really screwed up. So that one I think is
You know, it's
huge. I
so
don't know if you have
funny.
any
Just
thoughts about that, because that was such like, they never, there were other games that had a little bit of like, you can influence the outcome a little bit and
oh
decide
yeah.
what happens, but that one has always stood out to me, like,
Yes. No, yeah. I
just
was going to say it's so funny because
the
you
intensity of the
talking
choice.
about the ending of that game just reminded me how different the ending of that game really is. I was sitting here thinking about how like a golden era game could never end like that. It always ends up, dear Ned, well, I caught the bad guy, found the treasure, and everything's all good. Like that's how it always
Yes,
used.
they will all have a lightness to them.
Yes, all this one, no. I even remember Lonnie's tone when she read the letter. It was just the most like very dry, no warmth to the
Mm.
voice, stone cold reading. Like it would leave you with like once she ended and then the
Ugh.
screen
Yeah.
ends black and then it's credits and you're just sitting there like what? Really like it's like one of
It,
those movies that ends like in a very unexpected way and you're just sitting there watching the credits and you're just mortified that that's the end. So, I mean, I agree. I think that that's probably the biggest way that in this era that that's happened where
yeah.
they've let the
Yeah.
player have choice there.
Yeah. But then also just because I want to make sure we hit on a couple other big ones, like
Sure.
even the Silent Spy. They
Yeah.
give you those choices of committing like questionable acts for Revenant to get
Yes.
information. And I actually remember, I know there's a whole conversation you can have with Ned in that game where Nancy will be like, Ned, they're asking me to do things and I'm not sure if I should do them. And Ned, again, even Ned's reaction is like, I don't know what to tell you, Nancy. Like, you're just going to have to decide. And so you do, again, you have to make the choice. Like, do I make the perhaps this might not be an ethical, this is not an ethical thing I'm about to do,
Yes,
but I
yes,
really need
yes.
to get that information about my mom, or you can just, stick to your principles.
It makes you
And
choose.
yes, it forced, yes, you have to choose, or even in ignoring the phone call is still making a choice. Because
Yes,
Revenant will call you back
yes.
and say, like, well, you didn't do anything. Too
Right.
bad you don't get to hear. And then of course we touched on with the whole Ned and Nancy thing. The climax of Sea of Darkness with Ned and Nancy is the player is made to choose. Do you say I love you back to Ned? Or do you say, I'm not sure how I feel? And so it's just such like these things really, I feel like, just shape our perspective, like as we're playing, of what Nancy is like. And even as I touched on again, like I always feel it. And it's funny, even the I know the Sea of Darkness, the Ned and Nancy thing specifically. I can think of someone once they said in a live stream chat I was in, said something about like, I chose the bad option one time, where we're like, she's mean to him, and the person said like, I felt so bad doing that, like I don't do it anymore. Like, again, so it's influencing, like it makes us feel like I'm Nancy and I just made that choice. And I'm sure some people can choose that option, and they just don't care whether they broke Ned's heart or not, and they're
Right.
fine.
Sure.
But other, I think, people, like, we feel the feelings like, like, am I a horrible person? Like, because
Yes.
I just broke this guy's heart. Yeah. So much more shaping of Nancy's character.
Oh, yeah. And I know we've kind of lightly talked about this, and I feel like we'll get to have our run in the park when it comes to us. But, you know, the storylines here are much different in the personal era.
Yeah.
If we just kind of wanted to look at the arc of eras
Yeah.
and just overlook, we've gone through an experimental period where the stories were just all over the place. We went through an era where the stories were smooth as butter. They were golden, good stuff. And then we went through a season where they were finding their footing and we had very classic storylines. And now we're here. We're in the personal era. And we've talked about there's darker, more mature themes Nancy is having to deal with, and she is dealing with less just mystery and now mystery, but also other conflicts and interpersonal things on the side. Like, for example, Captive Curse, the spoiler for Captive Curse, but you know, it has a lot to do with Anya and this conflict she has relationally with her ex and how she's going to get revenge on it. So it's dealing with a lot of more other like side things rather than just like standard there's a murder or
Yeah.
there's a theft of treasure. We're dealing with like
Yes.
Silent Spy where like the storyline is very rooted in like family conflict and how I deal with unethical thing, like am I going to do it
Yes.
in trying to get more information about something I've always wanted to know, all of these things, right? But I know that this is more of a conversation that we'll get to have when we do our storylines episode, and that
Yeah.
comes in the future. But that's just something to note about the personal era, is that we are seeing another shift in the storylines here that is affecting how we as the player absorb the games of this period.
Yes. Yeah, there's so much more, I feel like, interpersonal conflict. Either the main mystery, like Captive Curse, that means, the mystery itself ends up boiling down to an interpersonal conflict.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
someone wanting to get revenge on their ex. Of course, Ghost of Thornton Hall is an intensely familial, family conflict game. And even I think, like, Shadow at the Water's Edge, as the outlier, again, was anticipating and kind of making that transition. We're going to get into much more, like, yes, interpersonal stuff. So we will definitely make sure to revisit this in the most thorough of detail,
Deep
because it
dives.
yes, it really does, not just, I think, define the storylines of this era, but I also think it explains a lot, even about, like, um maybe how we as players might react to the games, like just our experience. And yeah, just so many things. So thank you for bringing that up.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I'm excited to come back to that,
Me too.
because I have been prepping for those storylines episodes that are coming, and it's just amazing how it all fits, and there are patterns, and there are shifts, and the shifts happen as eras shift. Like, that is why we had to start with this series, because that is the framework. Yeah. So are we ready now to
We're so
revisit
ready.
the secondary name? Yeah, so we had touched on that we can also think of this era, and this is stepping away now from, we're going to move away more so from the games themselves. Although, again, I know Carter definitely, hopefully you can help draw attention to, like, how it is shaping, the games
Sure.
as they were being made in this era. But this is more, now we're talking more about, like, we talked about Nancy and her personal life and her interactions with people. But now we want to look at things more from the, like, her interactive side of things, almost like
The
her
fan side.
interactives personal life and their
Yeah.
interactions with the fans,
Oh, yeah.
because, again, like, the social media activity really just skyrockets, in this era. And so for, like, dating context, like, what time period we're in, Captive Curse came out in 2011, and I'd already mentioned that I know, like, the Amateur Sleuth blog, it existed before Kalina took it over, but I really still feel like, I think, really, we can credit Kalina. Like, I feel like she made
Absolutely.
that blog what it is. Just
Absolutely.
all the time that she invested, all the weekend puzzles that she made, all the behind the scenes little tidbits, and
Stop.
when
You're
she,
making me
yeah,
emotional.
and she'd keep, I was actually just looking at something again, prepping for this, and finding information that we might need for the video. But even just, she'd do the little birthday shout outs and everything. Like, I
Yes.
really just think the whole personality of that blog is owed to Kalina. So,
Absolutely.
so Kalina's running that blog during this era. So we have all of that. But then also there's all the activity, Facebook, Twitter, their YouTube channel. Their
Oh,
YouTube channel
I loved
became
their
quite
YouTube.
a big thing during this era. And then this would be more towards the tail end, and this is just going with how social media has developed over the years. Like Instagram, I found out, they started their Instagram account in May 2013, which Instagram, I feel like, is kind of their focus now. We're in the modern era, so that's a separate conversation. But back then, it was Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, I feel
Absolutely.
like. And I remember being on Facebook and, like, seeing all the posts. We have made a lot of references to that famous March Madness tournament.
Oh, yeah.
Um, just so many things. The Twitter thing, I didn't really do anything with Twitter because I wasn't on Twitter. But Facebook, I loved all the Facebook content, and I loved reading the Amateur Sleuth blog when I remembered to check it. Um, so they're just getting more interaction, like, with the fans, both them, like, interacting with the fans, but also now the fans are getting more interactive. So, I don't know if you want to talk about like ways in which her interactive really was able to kind of pull the fandom deeper into things
Oh,
and
I would
get
love
them
to.
both. Yes, both, because I know like social media, like that's your bread and butter. Like you know so much about it. You're so good at it. You have a
Oh, well,
lot of
thank
thoughts
you.
about marketing
I
and
love
things.
it.
So
Yes.
I want to hear what is Carter in with all his expertise and just your observations.
You're
What do you
so
have to tell
funny.
us?
You're
Yeah.
hyping me up. Thank you so
Well,
much.
would you, okay? Would you like me to not hype you up? I can pinprick. Like, sorry,
I
you don't
I
know a thing you're talking about. I regret asking you. Like, no, take it back. I'm
look,
taking this over.
you know what?
No, please, please.
I see, like, I don't even have to really say anything, y'all. I accept her praise, and she's gonna get me. You know what's funny? Because I was actually going back and looking at our episodes earlier, and I think you have dogged me in every episode. Kid you
Oh, have I?
not. What'd you say?
Oh, I'm pretty sure I was nice in at least the first one.
No,
I told you.
I think,
No,
I
I
think
told you.
at
See,
least in every episode.
no. I would say that you're lying, but I know it's just that your memory is failing you. Like, no, I was.
Wow.
was
Okay. Okay.
okay, we're just going all over the place. No, I praised you for your eras.
Thank
For
you.
the record, I love the eras.
Thank you so much.
For the record, I love the way your mind works about
Thank you
all
so
of this
much.
stuff.
No, no. In
Anyway,
all
no,
honesty, no.
I'm hyping you.
I'm
I'm
kidding.
hyping you up. Let me prove, since you're always accusing me of being a bully and taking shots at
It's
you, I can be nice.
fine. Well, no. Thank you. No, and
Share your expertise because I want to hear it. Maybe no one else does, but
thank
I want
you.
to hear
Wow. They're just not stopping. You're too funny. No, I did laugh really hard because I was like, man, there's one thing in every episode. It's that you and I have one moment where you say something really like you come for me. You come for me. And then I play victim.
it.
But yeah.
Now you're setting this up like a challenge. I'm gonna prove
So
you
Sass
wrong one
Showdown
of these
Sass
days.
Showdown
No, I'm gonna
continues.
prove you wrong. I'm gonna be perfectly pleasant to you.
Ooh.
And then you're gonna be like, you know what? I hated that. That's
It's good. I always enjoy it. No, no, no. But I'm sorry. Not to get off on that tangent. I just think it's so funny when it happens. But no, what I was gonna say is that it's interesting when you're looking at how her interactive in interacted with fans
oh 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 oh
because
proud sensei moment right here.
because no,
That was
it's
well done.
thank you so much. Because when they first began the company, they started doing, very like mail slips to people. They had
Oh, I remember.
advertisements.
Yes, you mentioned that. I think in the
Yes.
classic era
Yes, they did
episode.
mail
Yes.
slips. They did
Oh,
advertisements in books. Like it was a different age of advertisement, right? And then before the iPhone, so you're talking about circa like 2007, I think is when the iPhone came out. Before that, it was more website driven and people were going like to the website and there were the message boards and that's how people interacted with each other. But then with the iPhone and then as social media came, social media just like you said skyrockets. And when we get to the personal era, so really their social media presence really started to develop in 2011. So this is just a few years, 2010, 2011, just a few years after the iPhone. So it's really starting to pick up here. Okay, so at this point, now her interactive is responding with people in comments. Like they're interacting with people in a much quicker and faster way. Like people can ask questions. Like I remember on the Amateur Sleuth
yeah.
blog, Kalina would post something and people would be asking questions and she would be giving updates very quickly. So it's not something that people have to wait anymore for. They can get a pretty quick response out of the Her Interactive company when they have a
Sure.
question or
Mhm.
if they want to see something behind the scenes. That is something that Kalina did really awesome about. Like if somebody asked for something, she would provide it. I remember people would ask for, hey, I really wish I had a high res picture of blank because I would like to use it for whatever. And she'd be like, sure, send me your email and I'll get that to you. Like, it has just become the social part of this company where there's multiple accounts everywhere and everybody is consuming her interactive content in a bunch of different places at one time.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where we're at right now. And because they are more active on all these social media accounts, they start implementing like new ways of marketing their games, but also
Yeah.
because fan interaction has increased, they are able to utilize that within their company and do whatever they please with this data, such as what's your favorite game? If they know what everybody's favorite game is, then then they can make a fan favorite collectible tin that features all of everybody's favorite games, and then they can market it that so they
Hmm.
use this information to their advantage. um and then they also start doing like all of these contests, so like that they're still doing to this day. It developed in this particular social period and era where
So
you,
many contests.
it's so many contests.
I remember when I started hunting through the blog, prepping for this episode, I was finding contests. Again, I was a little bit out of the loop because this would have been like when I was in college, so
Sure.
kind of too busy sometimes to stay on top of things. But yes, I was just like, I definitely knew, there's the big ones, like the pumpkin carving contest started in this era, the cookie decorating contest started in this era. But then I was like digging up in the archives, the
Yes.
blog archives, and I'm just finding all these random like one time contests that
Yes.
then the result being it's also in this era you're always finding these little pictures of people who won contests and then you
Yes.
get your picture in the game because you're a winner.
Which I never
Because
have done, by the way, but always wanted to.
you want you've never entered one of the contests, or is that you've never been in the game
I think
and you
I've
really want to
entered
be?
a contest like through my Nancy Drew Times account maybe once, but like
Oh, okay.
I really I need to get better at that. I really would love to enter like more of their contests and just have fun and all that stuff. But yeah, no, I haven't gotten to really. But no, really, just having your picture in a game. I think that's so cool.
I think they should put your picture in the game just because.
See
You know
now
where they
I.
should put it though? They should put it where Waldo Matthias's face is on the door in the
Oh,
speakeasy.
I
Did
was
you really? Did you really
no,
think that you were?
no.
See, you
See,
knew.
no, I was actually I
You were waiting.
exactly what you
Like, when's she
said.
gonna hit me?
No, really, no, but exactly what you said is exactly what happened. I experienced what it was like for you to be nice to me, and I was like, well, this feels wrong, but it's okay. You saved it, so no, no, no. But I know. I really always wanted to have my picture in the game. I think that
Uh,
that's really cool. And do you remember at this time too? This is when they were posting a bunch of really random stuff like happy, what is it? Happy World of Bald People
oh
Day.
yeah, it was like heavy bald. Yeah,
Bald people.
yeah,
I
the
don't
bald.
know. I don't remember what it was.
Yes,
It just like really
yes.
some really iconic things that are unhinged have come
We
out of
will
this
try our
social
very best.
era.
I hope you all on screen right now are looking at that image because it means Carter and I tried our darndest to find it for you. Yes. Oh
but
my word. Yes, the
but
random graphics.
really
Days.
we should talk about this YouTube channel.
The YouTube channel.
What a
That's
gem.
what I that's what I really, really loved
Me too.
about this time. Like, what a time to be alive. So I checked and Her Interactive started the YouTube channel in June 2009. And it started, so that's experimental era, but it started just, they were very basic with it. They were only posting trailers
Which
and
Kalina helped
that
with,
was
by the
it.
way. I don't know if you knew that or
And
not.
I love that. I love that. Somewhere I know I knew that, but it's a detail that I forgot. And I'm glad to be reminded of it because yes, we can always celebrate all the work that she has put in to the series. So, once again, Kalina, we love you to pieces. So they're putting the trailers up, but then it is June of 2012. So we are fully entrenched in the personal era at this point, or the the social era for this side of things. And that was when they had their first marketing intern Phoenix, and
Oh, yeah,
she
yeah, yeah.
uh puts this introductory video on the channel, like introducing herself and like who she is, why she's at the company, why she's interning, what she's going to be doing. And she really, that started, I feel like, a whole thing of, we just get these really sometimes very just like fun, skits and things. Like she and Kalina did the Call Me Maybe
Oh,
spoof.
yeah, yeah. I forgot.
They were the two that made that video, like, just the funniest thing. And I know Phoenix did some other fun videos, like, I
I
think
just
Phoenix was.
I'm sorry, can I just say, since you just said that, but the Call Me Maybe like parody, wow, that is so of its time. I just love that we have that. I'm sorry, continue. I just had to point that
Yeah.
out.
No, it's so funny. Like, seriously, you all, if you just need a very fun walk down memory lane, just go on her Interactive's YouTube channel. And yeah, I would go to find Phoenix's first video and then just work your way forward, because the things that she put out, that Kalina put out, like, just on her own, and then, other interns through the years, like, there's just so much fun content. And I think it was Phoenix is the one, she got to do that really fun, I've always remembered this video. It was a fun, like, she got to go to the recording studio and get
Oh,
footage of some
yeah.
of the voice actors. I remember, like, that video was so exciting to me because I finally got to put faces and names together. And she also was the one, and there's just something about this video. It's almost like a core memory for me watching it for the first time. She's the one that filmed the team, like, when they would go out on a break of some sort and
Yes, I
they
know
would play
exactly which
hacky
one you're
sack
talking about.
together. And that video brings me so much joy. I actually rewatched it recently, and I remember watching that and thinking, like, man, how do I work at Her
I know,
Interactive? Because
same.
it just
It's
looks
just
like
like
the
friends are
happiest.
hanging
This
out and
looks like
just
the happiest place on earth. They're all out there in the parking lot playing hacky sack
yes.
together.
Oh, and
And
speaking of, since you just brought that up, just because it just popped in my mind, and I remember, Kalina talks about it on the Amateur Sleuth blog, and I think that there are multiple times where she mentions that the office would always go pick a cool place to go for lunch, and they would just like walk there, and then they would always just have like some
oh,
time outside where they would like play hacky sack, and I just kind of like love that detail that that's like a thing that they would do together, you know?
that's so amazing. And
Mm.
it gave the fans, a little bit more insight. Like, again, all these names that we see in the credits, finally we're starting to, like, again, put faces to names and kind of like see some of these people who are creating these games. You're kind of getting a sense of, like, yeah, the company culture and
And
what
you know
they're
what that
like.
does? Do you know what
I
that
think I know what you're
does?
about to say.
Because the
There was
more,
a bit of are you going to say there's a bit of an unintended consequence, I feel.
well, yes, there can be.
Anyway.
But I was going to say is that because they were more personal and they were able to show more of the people behind the company, fans became connected to the company and linked more closely than ever before,
Yes.
thus creating a stronger bond between fan
Yes.
and company.
Mhm.
This will become the downfall of her interactive
That's what I meant when I
when we
said.
get to the next episode and we talk about
That's
these things.
Yes, that's what I
Yes.
meant when I said a bit of an unintended consequence. Like, I do
Yes.
not regret for 1 second that we got all of the BTS videos
No, they were a lot. They were
and that
awesome.
we got, we got to see these interviews. Like, yeah, I know Nick Blahunka and Kathy Reuter, some of these people who are really spearheading these games. Like, this was really the first time I feel like that you kind of actually get to peek behind the curtain and see, like, how a Nancy Drew game is being made.
Yes.
And that's all wonderful. I'm so glad that we have that information. I'm so glad those YouTube videos exist. But yes, it creates a bond that then I feel like when things changed with the modern era,
Mm-hmm.
um, not just in terms of like the team itself underwent changes, but how they interacted, or I guess you could say chose not to interact with the fans. It was like having the rug pulled out from under you.
Mm.
So,
And that's going to be very
yes.
pivotal to the next episode. And we
Yes.
will get into that. And trust us, we will get to the root of it. We're going to talk about the things for sure.
Yes.
But I think that this is
Absolutely.
a good time for you to kind of do your family
Yes.
tree bit. I always get so excited to hear what you've dug up and how it relates to the eras.
Yeah. So we shall go to the family tree once again and just again talk about who's there because like once again big shifts happening during this era.
Oh, yeah.
So we had mentioned last week two names that I wanted to draw people's attention to remember. So I had said Kathy Reuter. She came on kind of later experimental era and ends up. You'll see her listed as the designer. You also start seeing her name listed under story concept. And then I had also mentioned Nick Blahanka. He joined the team again late experimental era, but those two names are the ones that really stand out to me in this era because if you go through the credits for all of the personal era games just repeatedly, you will see her at designer, him at writer, which I think in one thing that and also story concept. You'll see the two of them being listed as the story concept people. So that means they're working very closely together in coming up with these stories. Which again, Carter, doesn't that then make a lot of sense? Again, we don't know all the behind the scenes details, but to me, it makes a lot of sense if you have these two individuals working together constantly, does that not make it then so much easier to come up with backstory and plot lines that you want to keep, building up to or revisiting in some way? Like it becomes much easier to build Ned and Nancy drama and work your way up to Sea of Darkness if you're both on the same page about
Exactly.
like, here's where it started and here's where we're gonna go with it. You can build up to Silent Spy if you are, working, together to think through that. And again, I don't know the nature of all their conversations, but just in my mind, I saw their two names everywhere
Okay, I love that
in
you're
these
I
game
love that you're bringing
credits.
this up because every time you're bringing something up, it like cues my brain to remember something that I forgot. You're just
Okay.
bringing out memories. So there's actually a YouTube video where Nick and Kathy are interviewed together and they're talking about promoing Ghost of Thornton Hall, and they're both talking very heavily about what the storyline is going to be, and
Oh,
they're
okay. I
just
think I kind of
bouncing
remember that.
off each other about this storyline. So like exactly what you're describing is exactly how they were. They were, I think, very much like intertwined together on story, like making sure that all of it worked together. Because this is actually very interesting because like I know in the last era when we were talking about experimental, you were mentioning how there was almost like one team would take this game and the other team would take this game, or I'm sorry, director leader over each
Oh
game.
yes, it would be yes, Robert Riedel, executive producer, alternating with whoever was the creative director. Yes.
Yes. And so that's interesting for this era how you're having like these two people and they're very more like locked together on the concept of this specific period, which makes so much more sense that we keep seeing these repeated things happening in like this game, that game. It just makes so much more sense. I feel like they
Yes.
they two got together and they were like, I feel like we don't know enough about Nancy. Let's focus more on Nancy. Let's let's add
Could
some
be.
drama to her life. Let's add some conflict to her life. I feel like that's what they literally experimented and discussed together. I feel like, and now knowing what you found that they were very married together during this time, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be mentioning their names again as we do some of our writing deep dives cuz I guess I'll just make a statement right now and then leave it to keep simmering that I do feel very strongly that these games have a very particular flavor with their storylines, with their dialogue. Um, and it has to be, again, you look at same two people, and the case of like Nick Blahunka as the writer, like to me there's just an unmistakable like, yep, I can tell the same person or like people were responsible for this, and they had certain attitudes about characters that come out in this era, so we can hopefully come back to all of that. So they really, I feel like, in my mind, are kind of the two biggest names for the games. But then also, this is when, you know, things are not so rosy. And I think we all, we know where this story is headed. We know that after Sea of Darkness, there was a huge shift, and there was sadly like all of those layoffs. And we know, of course, that like who's the little like bit of her interactive that remains. It's just a tiny little bit. Like basically after this era, pretty much every familiar name is gone, and like only a couple of them carried over into the modern era. But it's in the personal era, you can actually see, you can see things again are starting to shift and move around, because it was during this time. uh Megan Geyser, she had been the CEO for such a long time. um they did this split thing where they then brought in Stuart Mulder as the CEO, and then she was kind of overseeing more like the creative side of things, and I think he was more responsible for like day-to-day operations. And the press release said something about, again, because they were trying to branch out into other things. Like I think other
So many different
platforms,
things
like
where, yes.
not just making PC games anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
they were trying to like get a footing in other things. So we had a change there with Stuart Mulder coming in, and then of course again, the final CEO and the one who is currently CEO, Penny Milliken. You know, let me just say the name. Feel your feelings, people. I know we all have them. Of course, she came in at Labyrinth of Lies, I think it was, and of course we know with that's going to lead to a much so many changes from top to bottom. You're gonna blink yourself to death. Ah, yes.
Contain self,
Feel like
contain self. I feel
can't
like
be diplomatic, so I'm just gonna not say
I feel
anything.
like Mr. Crocker from
Um,
Fairly Odd Parents, just trying to hold it
it's,
in.
it's so funny. I'm looking at my notes and look back at you, and I just see like the story you are telling in your facial expressions right now. Anyway, that's funny. So, and again, Megan Geyser, that was someone we mentioned her name in the classic era. This is someone who was there from the beginning. She left during this
From
era.
the very
Um,
beginning.
Robert Riedel, he was there from the beginning, and his job role starts to shift during this era. And I think it was Deadly Device was his very last game, but even before that, like he was just way less involved than he had been. He left during this period. So again, that's another staple who had left. There are still, you can find, I found a lot of familiar names. Tim Burke was the creative director during this time, and he was actually someone who had been on the team from the beginning. Classic era, I think he was an environmental artist of some sort, as I recall. And there were some other familiar names, but to me, what stands out besides Kathy and Nick, and I'm thinking kind of their role with shaping the games. And then also I should mention there was a Katie Chironis who she's listed as a writer on Sea of Darkness, but that was literally the only game. So when I tend to think more like this is the Nick Blahunka era for writing. But like yeah, all those CEO like top level things shifting. So technically there's 3 CEOs during this era. So you can just see we're getting to that moment
Can
where
I
we
just
all
say,
know
I mean, this
everything everything changed.
This is just, I guess a surface level assessment, but maybe more on this in the next episode. If the CEO has to change that much, it's not a good sign.
I
Just
would agree
saying.
with that. Well, and also, do you remember when we did our golden era episode? And
Yes,
now
the
we had
consistency.
drawn attention to the fact that for the most part, it's very consistent. Um, in that era, you'll see the same person
Mm-hmm.
in a job role, so there was a lot of stability. So it really is, I can see the winds of change. To bring that in.
Yes.
Which is hard, yeah. And of course, we'll have next week's conversation and all that led to. But at the same time, this feels like a fitting transition because her interactive was undergoing a lot of changes, and
Hmm.
those shifts on their part, I feel like start to come through in these games. And then, of course, Sea of Darkness, that was the last one, and then a huge shift. But um, today's episode is special because we're gonna do something other than just talking about the eras. We're gonna get a little bit more again personal.
Told you that
Um,
word
this
would
is
keep
my
coming up.
this is not my time to shine. Um, my thoughts will come at a later date, but this is actually something that Carter and I have talked about behind the scenes. I think we were prepping for we were there prepping for the podcast, or we were just chatting about Nancy Drew things in general. And I remember you just suddenly, like, you caught me off guard. You just asked me a question. I wasn't expecting it, but then it got so many wheels turning, and your wheels have clearly already been turning about it for a long time.
Sure.
You asked me, when did the series change for you? And I'm like, I guess I don't know. I've never really stopped to think about, like, has there been a time in my life where Nancy Drew games suddenly felt really different to me? And you brought it up because you were thinking specifically about this time period of games. So we want to actually end today's episode with, I am just going to invite Carter to kind of talk about, like, his personal journey as a Nancy Drew fan and kind of his relationship with this time period, because the personal era actually, it caused a shift for, like, you and kind of your feelings about Nancy Drew games and, like, how they felt to you as a player. So please, please share with us. And I very purposefully told them, I'm like, Carter, like, don't tell me anything. I don't want to know until the podcast what you think, because I want to be able to just hear it, and respond in the moment. So can you just kind of share how the personal era was a game changer for, like, you as a player, and just made Nancy Drew games feel different to you than they had before?
I'll try. Because
Okay.
I almost feel emotional just hearing you set me up to
Oh.
talk about, no, yeah, to talk about to answer the question, because Nancy Drew, of course, the games have been like a huge part of my life, and played every single one of them. And it started with Danger on Deception Island, and it took 3 minutes to be hooked. Like, that's all it took. Like, it
Mm.
just, all I needed was Nancy to read the letter and to see that intro where Katie sees that someone has ransacked her boat. And then I was like, who ransacked your boat? Why did they ransack your boat? I want to know who ransacked your boat. Why would they do that? Like, and that's where it started, and it kept on for the rest of the games. Um, but yeah, no, I asked because I am curious. And if you're watching, I would love for you to answer this question in the comments below, because I want to know if it is like this for other fans, if they have like a certain like space where the games felt different. But for me, it is actually almost like the start of where this era is. It like kind of starts with Shadow at Water's Edge, but then it like fully feels different to me when we get to Captive Curse. And I guess
Mm.
my explanation is, you know, when we got Shadow at Water's Edge and we played it, there were still some things in that game for me that was like still like very Nancy and like felt, very gung ho and like light, even though it's a darker
The
game.
lightness.
The
Yeah.
lightness of the world that Nancy was in and who she was still there. The games, even if they're a more spookier game like Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake or Curse of Blackmore Manor or The Haunting Castle Malloy, something about them still felt like there was like this chumminess to them where I was like, man, I just love that Nancy. Like she's just so funny. She's so quirky. She's so good. And
Just
then
very charming, would you
yes,
say? Is
yes,
that a
very
good word?
charming. Yeah, no, that's a
Yeah.
great word. And then something about when we get to this game and onward, I just felt like a little like shift where I was like, I felt a little different. That just felt
Mm.
like something changed, and I had no idea what it was. But I was like, no, 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 maybe it's nothing. And I just kind of like put those
Ah.
put those feelings to the side. And then we got to Captive Curse, and I was like, I what is it? I couldn't figure it out. It was like, because in the past, even if a game was quote unquote like, I didn't like that game, it was still like a Nancy Drew game for me, and I could
Like
still,
there was something in the air that you're
y-
breathing as a player.
yes,
Like, yes, just
yes,
like a magic to it, and yeah, again that
yes,
charm. Yeah, I get I know. I feel like you're trying to describe something that almost can't be put into words. And yet, I
yes.
feel like every longtime Nancy Drew fan, I think we all, yeah, we all know, even if we can't articulate it, we know exactly what you're trying to describe.
Yes, it is. It's
There's
so
just
hard
like
to
an
describe. It's
intangible,
a
yeah,
feeling that I can't put into
feeling.
words, but I
Yeah.
know that from like Captive Curse and
But you
onward,
know it
I
enough to know this was different.
yeah, this was different. Like I would, like for example, like I would play a mystery and I'd get so up into like the story and the dialogue and understood like the big picture, but when we got to things like Captive Curse, Tomb of the Lost Queen, Ghost of Thornton Hall, something about the big picture faded away. And I was like, I would end a game and I would be like, I don't really think I clearly understand what I just played. And that would always leave me a bit frustrated as a player because I would be like, well, what's wrong? Like, why don't I get it? Like, I feel like I'm supposed to, I'm supposed to get it. And even though I could pick up on some things like Silent Spy, like I could definitely feel the emotion, there was just so much packed into one game. There was so much dialogue. There was so much just side story, which is what a lot of the personal era games have, that I would lose some of that big picture. And when I would get to completion, I would just be kind of like, hmm, like I, I don't know what I'm supposed to think or
Mm,
feel. Like I don't have a sense of completion. And so I every game
big.
that I played in this whole era felt very similar to that. I think the only exception is Alibi and Ashes. I think that's the only game that I felt I could still feel like a lightness in the air. And maybe that's because it was in Nancy's hometown and it had to do a lot of more like a lot of more like classic Nancy Drew stuff. Like we're getting to know a lot more about Nancy, Bess, George, and Ned and Carson, and it's her hometown, and it's River Heights, and it's very, oh, here's her room, and everything is very like all about her and her world, but everything else was just overwhelming in a sense, having gone from all the other games to now this era. Even though it was supposed to be all about Nancy and we were supposed to kind of get wrapped up in who she was and how she dealt with things, I never felt more disconnected
Oh,
with
interesting.
Nancy than I ever had than when I got to this era.
Oh, that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So it's like almost had the opposite effect. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, no, and then that's so weird. I feel like when, and I don't know, like maybe, and this just may be like a personal thing for me, but it was almost like, I always say all the time, I'm like, oh, I just wish that we could have like just like know everything and just learn all the things, but there actually is some good in leaving things less revealed because it gives your mind the opportunity to, connect dots on your own and think of what you will. It was just enough world building to have those few emails in Danger on Deception Island to understand what Hannah and Carson were like. You
Yeah.
know, we actually, every time you called back on to the home phone on her cell phone, it'd always be Hannah. This is the Drew residence. Please leave a message after the beep. And you never get to like ever talk to them. And as a kid playing the game, I'd be like, oh, I want to talk to Hannah. But having those emails from Hannah and seeing how she's like, oh, your father blew the kitchen up again, or whatever she would say,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like I can picture that happening. I can picture what she's like, and I can, just from having a 10-second voicemail and reading her emails, I know what she's like and I know what she looks like. And, I don't know if I'd want to see Hannah in a game. I don't know if I, because in my mind, I've had an image of her for the last, what, 20 years. And
Hmm.
so I think that when we got to the personal era and we were just getting so much about Nancy like never before, and because it's a hard shift. Like, I mean, like, you're not just getting little tiny bits, you're getting a lot about Nancy.
Yeah.
And I think that that was a very hard shift for me to adapt to, in combination with all of the other changes in storyline and just where the games were headed company wise. Everything was changing so fast, and I don't think I was able to handle how much change was happening.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I think what like the specific word that you said probably encapsulates it the best for me, is that the games kind of lost a little bit of their magic and goldenness to me when we got
Hmm.
to this era. So
Yeah, and yeah, and that's all makes so much sense to me. Like I'm holding off my answer to this question until next week because like yeah, I kind of evaluate when it came down to it like the biggest most drastic shift for me came with the transition into the modern era. So I'll share my thoughts next week. But at the same time, I feel like I resonate so much with everything you just said. Um, and the more I have played the personal era games, just the more I feel like it has become apparent to me. Like, yeah, there is just I feel like there's just a different feel to them than the games that came before. And again, like um to anyone listening and you love this era, maybe you love most or all of the games in this era, like you might feel differently. Maybe these games didn't hit you in the same way, or maybe you're sitting here and being like, "Oh my word, Carter, you just put into words like things I have been thinking, or like I didn't even know I was thinking." And now I'm sitting here and saying, "Amen." Like I totally agree with that. So, again, that's why we're inviting you all to share with us, like, if at any point this series has ever felt like somehow different to you. And only you can answer that question. Like, what do we mean by does it feel different? But everything you just said, it makes so much sense to me. There's something about like yeah, the magic. I do think it changed somehow. I think
and
I
maybe
that makes a lot of that makes a lot of sense to me. I think and we had been talking about like that, the weightiness. Yes, I feel like of the stories,
that's what I was going to say.
and yeah,
I was going to say
and
maybe that has a lot to do with it, is that because Nancy is having to deal with a lot heavier things than she ever has before, but not just in like one game, it's like in a stretch of an entire slew of games and they're always back to back. maybe that just tends to make a more heavier air over this specific period
Yeah.
and era, which I'm totally fine with a game having to like get into some deeper stuff, although I tend to lean towards more lighter ones.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I think it was the repetitiveness of like that growing up of Nancy, of this
Yeah.
of this more mature things that she's having to deal with, and it was a constant thing. I was like, oh, you know what,
Yeah.
this is I'm already stressed in life, and this is starting to stress me out, and this is supposed to be almost more like a, you know, escape into this world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, I want to like tuck this thought away. I think you and I definitely, it's like we need to, between the two of us, we have to remember, like, we must revisit this
Yes,
in the storylines episode.
have
Cause
to.
I know we have already had so many, I feel like, back and
Epiphanies.
forth about some yeah, kind of the darkness and some of the weightiness of the stories in this particular era. So
Mm-hmm.
we definitely, I think, need to revisit that because I yes, I do feel like your all your feelings that you just described. Again, we've said this many times, like, things don't happen in a vacuum.
Yes.
Um, and your feelings, I can see very clearly, are tied to, I feel like, specific shifts that are happening, and it just changed it for you.
Yes.
So
And I'm very
thank you so
excited
much for
to
sharing.
oh, thank you. I'm actually very excited to hear your thoughts next week. Um
It's
I
gonna be a big one.
oh, I'm excited. And I think next week in general
Like,
is
do
going
we
to
all
be a
need to
big
get on
one.
the couch for therapy for therapy next week?
We might honestly, I
Goodness.
think next week will be our longest episode, but rightfully so because there are a lot of things to dive into with next week's
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
I mean, there just are.
Yo,
You have to have all
buckle
that
up, people.
context before we talk about it.
I think there
So
will be a yeah, I think there will
we
be a lot.
definitely, let me tell you something. We deep dive in this podcast, and baby, we deep dive in next week. Deep,
Very deep. Yes. Oh goodness.
deep side
But
of
as
the
always, it's
pool
yeah.
isn't even deep
Yep.
enough.
It's but every conversation is great. And I feel like I having these conversations with you every week, I feel like I learn so much. I learn so much doing the research, and then I learn even more talking it out with you.
I feel the same way.
And I am just always, I feel like my realities are always shifting, even just because of the conversations that we're having. Like, I just said to someone recently, I have a tier list and I feel like I need to redo my entire tier list because talking about the eras every week with Carter is making me rethink like every thought I ever had about everything. So I hope you all are enjoying listening to
See, this
these
is why
conversations.
I haven't even made
Yeah.
my tier list yet. It's
Okay.
coming though. I got to get through
You s-
some other
yeah.
things, but it's coming.
Yeah. You say that, and yet I wonder, it may just always be the impossible question because
Yeah, it
I'm
might.
starting to come around to the viewpoint of like, I don't know if this can be done. It's so hard to commit. Anyway,
It's hard.
we are swiftly approaching the end of this little mini series, so then we can jump off the diving board into all of our little pools of individual topics that we want to cover. But
And we're
this
very stoked about it.
yes, this has been another great one,
Mhm.
I think. And come back next week for the modern era, which you may realize there's only 2 games that we need to discuss. And yet, within those 2 games, there are so many things to cover
So
because
many things.
more change. Oh, the times they are changing once again. So here we go. But thanks for joining us today, everyone.
We'll catch you next week. Bye.
Bye.